All right, Mr. Clerk, it is 12:30. Are you ready to begin?
Yes, sir. I think information technology is up next, and Mr. Strickland's ready to go.
All right, Mr. Strickland.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, City Manager, and colleagues. My name is Neymar Strickland, Information Technology Director. Next slide, please. I aligned our goals and objectives and accomplishments with the strategic plan. And as it relates to strategic plan goal 1, we have a small team, but they're a great team. And first off, I want to thank them for all the work that they do. But it's our goal this year to increase the numbers to allow them some training time through conferences of the educational path. We also continue to collaborate with neighboring municipalities on local and countywide initiatives, such as the Next Generation 911. We work in concert with all departments to align our technology goals with their innovative goals. As it relates to strategic goal 2, we continue to work with GMA on infrastructure and telecommunication rules and regulations to better align the city's franchise fees and other financial opportunities. And we continue to work with telecommunication companies and other partners to improve broadband availability and smart city initiatives across the city boundary. Next slide. As it relates to strategic goal 3, we continue to partner with departments to enhance their service delivery models by innovating through transparency and process improvement. We improve the citizen-facing technology services in partnerships with servicing departments. And we're looking to implement a robust transparency fabric that allows up-to-date status on all public-facing services. We didn't have anything in strategic goal 4, but strategic goal 5 is we're looking at implementing technical services that will allow departments to seamlessly collaborate and provide collective vision into our development services model. Next slide. Our accomplishments, we maintain a high level of technology readiness and availability that allowed the city to continue business operations in person and remotely. We completed technology assessments across the city departments that allowed us to develop a clear plan for continual improvement. We work with GMA to audit our infrastructure and telecommunications to ensure the city is in line with current guidelines and regulations brought down by the state. Next slide. Strategic goal 3, we enhance graphical information systems, other known as GIS, capabilities and integrations into city services that benefits leadership and staff's abilities to support our citizens. Strategic goal 5, we work with departments to automate paper processes. We implemented technical services that brings like departmental services together to enhance service delivery. And we continue to innovate process improvements through technology and business alignment. Next slide. As it relates to the proposed budget, our overall number is down a few dollars, and we're looking at adding personnel as previously mentioned. Some of the contractual services, we've shifted some of those funding needs to other areas within the budget. And our supplies, we shifted some new locations and things that we're looking at for that. And the total operating budget is 2.7 million, and the overall budget complete is 3.8 million. Next slide. As it relates to the personnel, we're looking to stay status quo across the board, but adding a IT program manager to manage the current and upcoming projects, and also a service desk analyst to be the first line support of help desk and work order requests. and which includes the COLA and the merit adjustments. At this time, if there are any questions, I'll take those.
All right, I'm looking for hands, and I am also looking in the queue. You didn't start a new queue, did you?
No, sir.
Cool. All right. I don't see any now. Maybe some will come. I have two questions. One, the Wi-Fi in both in our city hall and several of our city buildings is pretty bad. It's pretty spotty. Is there any money anywhere in these budgets to improve the connectivity in our municipal buildings?
Yes, so we have some in professional services as well as in equipment. We're looking at doing surveys. We're actually at Welcome World now doing a survey of the infrastructure to kind of look at what the actual issues are. So yes, there are dollars associated with those.
Right. As we are headed back to holding our meetings in the Southwest Art Center, I would like to ask you to consider prioritizing there as well as Wolf Creek. That is a big component of concert going now, is that people want to stream, videos and pictures and all those things. So I would just like to make that request. And then secondly, training for Apple certifications, Mac OS certifications for staff. I know that my office is buying Macs. I know the communications department is buying them. They're just a standard for people that are doing graphic design and communications work. Is there any money in the budget to maybe expand the training and certification for IT staff on Macs?
We'll look at that. I don't think we had anything specifically for Mac training, but we will look at that option.
Thank you. I would appreciate that consideration. As I said, more staff are buying that hardware. And I see no one else and no one in the queue, so you can go ahead with your next presentation, Mr. Clerk. Thank you.
Thank you all.
The next presentation is by the legal department. I believe Mr. Hyman is present.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Can everyone hear and see me?
Yes.
Okay. Next slide, Ms. Adams, please. I briefly just want to touch upon a few goals and objectives. For those who are watching and don't know, I've been roughly in the office approximately a year and 8 months. And so a lot of the goals that are listed are continuations of the goal when I started, and that would be continue legal training and advice to the mayor, council, and department heads, maintain a collaborative approach between my office, the city manager, and department heads, continue to foster professional development and cross-training of my staff, and also just continue to try to stay ahead of the curve as it relates to technology and just being efficient. Those are kind of the goals that I'd like to continue and just kind of go moving forward. Next slide, please. This is a list of accomplishments, but it's not our office's accomplishments, it's the city's accomplishments. And so that's the way I've kind of framed it, that the city decided that they want an in-house law department. And so we've been in existence roughly over a year. When this office was initially formed, it was basically kind of a one-person show, and then slowly but surely brought on a paralegal, an assistant city attorney, Ms. McClendon, and initially a staff attorney by way of Ms. Renee, ultimately administrative assistant, and Ms. Dawn Alvin. And due to Ms. Renee's work and competency in those areas, she was been recently promoted to an assistant city attorney, which was a win-win for our office in the city, as well as it then creates a vacancy for another person, in which we'll get into a little bit later in the slide. And I've just been fortunate enough to work with a very dynamic team, a very dynamic employees, mayor, council, city manager, department heads. I like the interaction, like the conversation. And so that's been an accomplishment, just continue to foster those relationships. Also, in the role as city attorney, I had the opportunity to have numerous conversations with county attorney, other city attorneys, and just continue to build that network and connection with other city attorneys and county attorneys. Next slide, please. This is the proposed budget. And as you can see, the amended for personnel, purchase service contracts, supplies and operating. The proposed as it relates to personnel would factor in a staff's attorney that would have a contract compliance experience, a component to it. So that would kind of, I guess, deal with the two birds with one stone in terms of trying to feel that need for the city. Also, we're looking at basically a net delta of 420 between the total budget for amended and the new budget. There's just a lot of situations that arise that mayor and council may need the legal department to deal with. And so pretty much that proposed budget is kind of stayed around the same number from my inception. Next slide. And here you'll just see what I mentioned earlier in terms of the staff from my office, city attorney, assistant city attorney, paralegal, administrative assistant, and then a proposed staff attorney / compliance officer. And that concludes my brief presentation.
Mr. Mayor?
All right, I am looking in the queue to see if there are any hands, and I see none in the queue. Go ahead. Thank you.
The next presentation is by Community Development. And Mr. Hall is present.
Honorable Mayor and members of council, Derek Hall, the Community Development Director, is going to present this budget on behalf of the department. Sorry, I have to adjust my glasses to look at the slides. As it relates to the Community Development Department's accomplishments for fiscal year 2022, we wanted to just highlight a couple of things that we think are noted across the city. First and foremost, we were able to launch the O National LCI Planning Grant. As many of you all know, this straddles council districts 5, 6, and 7, and we've been engaged in a number of meetings with our consultant to talk about reimagining what this district looked like, what this district can look like once we have professional planners and architects meet the community where they are to discuss improvements within the area. Shortly after I started doing the latter part of May, I quickly assessed the need for some training related to planning and zoning law. As you can imagine, Georgia, like any other state that you may travel, has specific planning and zoning laws that require for individuals who are undergoing and are practicing planning, and particularly zoning, that you understand some basic fundamentals related to land use. And so I coordinated with UGA a training session for approximately 18 staff members, but that also included some members of some of our boards, the Planning Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, to allow them an opportunity to hear from the experts and to better understand what rules and responsibilities are related to the individuals that will at some point undertake planning and zoning activities in the city. Thanks to the graciousness of Mayor and Council, we will host a public hearing later today to present our HUD mandated annual action plan for program year 2022. It should be noted that we just received our letter in June. And so thanks to the diligence of the city manager and the finance director and the finance department, but specifically our finance director, and also members of the community development department, we were able to put together our annual action plan. And in consultation with department heads and others, we were able to propose for mayor and council some proposed activities for the funding that we'll receive for this fiscal year. Interestingly enough, the fiscal year, the program year, I should say, started back in January, but HUD did not release the letters until June of this year. So we had a little more than 2 months to get that plan done. Part of what I know to work well, particularly when you are intaking a number of applications, is to have a triage meeting with the teams. And so I initiated a weekly triage meeting. And in fact, our Tuesday triage meeting is going to occur at 1 o'clock. And the purpose of this meeting is to look at all the new applications that have come in the week before and discuss as a group related to community development and some of the other reviewing departments, exactly how best to approach tackling and handling the different nuances of the projects that are being proposed or the activities that are being proposed. And then on Thursdays, we host a development review meeting, again, with all the reviewing departments to discuss major projects. And these are projects that I've come up with some criteria that we think will have a major impact in the city. And we want to take an approach of listening to all the departments in one setting to make sure that we understand exactly what the impacts are going to be, both within a division or within a department and just overall to the city. As of last night, at a meeting that I presented to and Mayor Pro Tem's Reed's District 5, we talked about, and it was the first time that we discussed having community planning teams. My assessment in attending community meetings, public hearings, in particular city council meetings, planning commission meetings, there is a great desire in the community to learn more about planning and zoning and comprehensive plans and different type of topics that covered the array of different areas within planning and development. And so I discussed this initiative with the city manager, and we think it's a great idea to just have some direct outreach outside of planning commission meetings and zoning board of appeal meetings with community stakeholders. Many of these are your constituents, mayor and council, to discuss with them different planning topics and to provide education, but to also provide them with an opportunity to understand how many of these topics are implemented, not only in Metro Atlanta, but in other parts of Georgia and other parts of the United States. And then finally, and most recently, I think many of you are aware that we are in an agreement with Charles Abbott's and Associates, which is our primary contractor for building services. They also provide some supplemental engineering services. In my view, in looking at the contract, we needed to discuss some potential renegotiations. Just a quick overview of that particular contract. There is a revenue split with or between the city and with CAA, basically suggesting that for the first $100,000 in building permits, we share the revenue up to 45% with the consultant. Anything above 100,000, we share. Anything above 100,000, we share 50% of the revenue. And so, as we are in the negotiation phase, I wanted to make sure that we can talk to CAA as well as assess what we think are going to be maybe some potential revenue losses related to building permits because of the increases with the interest rates nationwide. And so we've successfully started the negotiations, and we will be wrapping those up in the next week or so. Next slide. As it relates to the department's fiscal year 2023 goals and objectives, we want to fully integrate all of community development applications through our online permitting system. This may come as a shock to you. It was certainly a shock to me that although we have SAGES and it works fairly well for individuals that have used it, it is not all encompassing of all of the community development applications. So for instance, for all of the activities for the planning and zoning division, the rezoning applications, the modification applications, requests to do comprehensive plan amendments related to land use, and special use permits. None of those applications are uploaded and included in SAGES. And so we have to kind of work double time to make sure that we can get the applications out to our applicants who are requesting these types of land use cases. Similarly, there are a couple of applications that are not integrated into our current permitting system from engineering and also for development services division. And so just making sure that we can take a holistic approach and include all applications through the online permitting process is one of our goals. And we look to achieve this soon after the start of the new fiscal year. This has been something, this next item, next bullet point has been something that has been, as it was brought to my attention, a great deal of discussion in the city, and that is implementing a development impact fee study. We are going to be releasing an RFP fairly soon to bring on a consultant to do the actual study. And based upon that study, we will be making recommendations to mayor and council. But certainly, you know, with the city of South Fulton being a city that probably is in the top 3 of municipalities that is ripe for development, we need to make sure that developers are paying their fair share as it relates to the impacts that are occurring with new development. And so our goal is to implement, once this study is conducted, to implement many of the recommendations related to impact fees and the associated activities that come with that. I had mentioned previously regarding our renegotiation of the building, the contractor for our building services, which is Charles Abbott and Associates, looking at trying to revise and have a different look on what the building division looks like. And so part of what we're doing right now into next fiscal year is an assessment of revising the building division and maybe considering potentially bringing that in-house as opposed to contracting. So we're going to do a full assessment of that and then bring forward a recommendation in fiscal year 2023 to council on our recommendations. These other activities, I think, are, I've heard specifically from members of council related to the comprehensive plan update, understanding and knowing that state statute required us to have a comprehensive plan update, but at the same time, understanding that it was somewhat of a rush process and there were many missed opportunities related to what was adopted. I want to work with all of the elected officials in their respective districts to see if there are any amendments that we can do at the staff level and at the city level to really achieve what we were hoping to occur when this particular activity, these activities occurred that were headed up in December of 2021. And similarly, looking at the revised fee schedule, a task that I have staff working on right now is looking at the basic processing times it takes to do anything from processing a building permit to going through a change of zone or special use application, what are the actual man hours that it takes to actually do some of these things? And so looking at that in relation to what we charge for our processing fees and seeing if it needs to potentially be increased or maybe even maintain at its current level, but initiating that revised fee schedule. And I think that's going to occur across all city departments. One thing that I am absolutely looking forward to is understanding how long it takes to process permits and understand how long it takes for planning services. And so my goal is try to reduce that time by at least 25%. And part of that has to do with making sure that we have a online permitting system that actually is all encompassing, all inclusive, where you get the directions, you get the information that you need from the permitting system, and it helps you to facilitate a better understanding and a quick response in terms of submitting plans and understanding what the requirements are for the various types of applications that we have across community development. And then finally, and this is something that I have some specific experience with, and I've talked with our esteemed Director of Economic Development, Mr. Jones, about collaborating on community development and economic development speaker series. And this is my attempt, this is our attempt, I should say, to bring in nationally renowned planning professionals, economic development professionals, to really talk to the community of South Fulton about the potential of what can happen and how we can look at our current landscape and make sure that we implement those needed changes and those desires that we hear oftentimes from the community. So those are the specific community development fiscal year 2023 goals and objectives. As we go to the next slide, we look at the specific proposed budget. Related to personnel, we're looking at roughly around 1.6 million. And that is inclusive of the positions that we budgeted for in 2022. In terms of contract services, we know that we're going to have a proposed RFP that's going to hit the streets in early 2023 for the fiscal year related to our development impact fees. And so we want to make sure that we have enough money to pay for the full analysis and also the recommendations that will be brought forth to Mayor and Council for consideration. Supplies, at 31,000, debt service around 32,500, and then the total budget amount is roughly $3.2 million for the department. And as I wrap up my presentation, just wanted to have a focus of the positions that we are proposing. So we are keeping literally the same amount of positions, with the exception of an increase with the planning division. As you all know, right now we have one senior planner, and just with the volume of work and the response time that it requires, planning activities require a great deal of analysis, interpretation. We have to also look at some best practices. And so we see the need to have an additional senior planner to assist not only in the, as I call it, the current planning activities. Those are the applications that are submitted to the city, but more specifically for the long range planning activities or the advanced planning activities, the community meetings that we want to have ahead of any application that's going to go. And so part of what we're looking to do with this second senior planner is to be proactive in our planning endeavors. And this person, along with some other key personnel in the department, will host the community planning teams, will organize them, will help provide them the information that they need so that they are aware and amenable and are knowledgeable of these specific proactive activities that we're trying to do to help educate our community. So in total, we're looking at keeping our employment right at 22 staff members in the department. And specifically for personnel and benefits, we're looking for an amount of $1.6 million. As I mentioned, we are going to be adding the senior planner, and we're continuing to keep a planner level, a first level planner position, and a permit specialist position partially funded to bring us up to about 5 that will help support the development services division. And all of these amounts obviously include COLA and merit adjustments. So with that, I will conclude my presentation and am happy to answer any questions mayor or council may have.
All right, thank you. I don't see, I see Councilwoman Willis in the queue, and Mr. Sebastian has his hand raised. So go ahead, Councilwoman Willis.
I'll defer to Council. I literally just got in the office, so I know his hand was raised way before I put one in the queue. So if you don't mind, Mayor, will you please recognize Councilmember Sebastian first, because he was in the queue first. Thank you.
Just a reminder to everyone that the queue is open if you want to go that way, but go ahead, Councilman Sebastian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Willis. Thank you, Mr. Hall, for your presentation. I do have a question and a volunteer opportunity. The program, the education program that you mentioned about forming these community groups to educate around planning and zoning and so on. I literally have a group set up already, and that was part of our thing. So when are you planning to launch that so that I could connect those folks up to you? And I would love District 4 group to become a model that maybe you guys can learn from, because it's literally ready to go. We're already working.
That's a great question, Council Member. So we are looking at targeting our marketing to start at the end of August, beginning of September. And we hope to do this in concert with all of the elected officials. And the idea really is to focus on specific topics that span the realm of community development, economic development. Again, this is something that I will be partnering with Artie Jones and Economic Development Department, but we want to touch on some of those topics that people hear, but they may not have a full understanding about. So they will range from everything from affordable housing to market rate housing to mixed income communities to transit-oriented development. So our hope is that as we go around the city and we bring on more of our planning staff, we will be able to just have these community-based meetings, not considering any planning activity that's coming before Planning Commission, but to really just have dialogue and to have focused discussion.
Yeah, again, I'm so with you on this, and I'm glad that you guys are doing this, because I sat in a meeting on a specific project this was about, and for some reason, as small as I am, a lot of people didn't realize I was in the room, and so they were going in hard a little bit on the city. And a lot of the things that I heard from them was a lack of knowledge based on how the processes work. So sometimes you have people making a whole lot of noise, but not really. They mean well, but they just don't know how the processes work and can help spread the correct information. And so they will continue to spread, negative information, and then it sort of backfires. So again, I'm so happy that you guys are launching this, and I'm looking forward at least to working with you and Artie on behalf of District 4.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Councilwoman Willis.
Thank you for recognizing me, Mayor. I may have missed this, and if I did, I'll get with you, or I'll go back and look at the presentation, because I know we have other presentations, and we have a URA meeting at 3:30. Did you touch over the building inspection process because how much are we currently paying every time someone has an LDP and we have to send out inspectors, and Charles Abbott is getting a huge percentage of our revenue. And I've been asking for the past 2 years and brought this to the city manager's attention that we should either look at bringing that process in-house, because we can hire for a fraction of that cost. And you mentioned that you looked at it and you may revamp the contract. Can you speak to that, or have you already spoken to that? And if you have, I'll just move on and get with you offline.
Absolutely, Councilwoman. And you asked very critical and I think good questions related to some of the services that are being contracted out. As it stands right now, and I've shared this information with the city manager and the finance director, finance department, including the finance director, that we are on tap this year specifically for the CAA Charles Abbott and Associates contract to pay approximately $1.5 million for services rendered through this fiscal year. And a lot of it is predicated to the setup of the revenue sharing. And again, that's 45% of revenues up to $100,000, and then 50% of revenues for anything above. And I can tell you, just in looking at the monthly reports, it's cyclical in terms of the highs and lows. We will pay them in any given month as low as $115,000 and as high as $380,000, based upon that revenue share agreement that we have. And so, again, in consultation with the city manager's office and with the finance department, we discussed right now, and actually finance and my department engaged already in a negotiation discussion with Charles Abbott Associates to suggest to them that we're looking at changing that revenue split. We have a desire to change it because we know that we anticipate there are going to be lost revenues, because with higher interest rates, they're going to impact the number of people who can, one, get qualified for a house, and then two, just impacting the amount of volume that we see with building permits in general. And so we want to be honest and forthright in having this discussion with mayor and council in anticipation of lost revenue because of these higher interest rates, but at the same time being fiscally prudent and looking at this current agreement and understanding that it doesn't, we're 5 years into this as a city. And so, now is the time for us to renegotiate. And so if we don't initiate that now, we will be locked into that agreement for the next fiscal year. So that's why we are exploring what would it take to create a division. I will say that with the building division, that is the one division where all of the applications for the different types of permits that are being issued by them, building permits, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all of the associated trades, they're all online and they're all self-serve. And so a lot of what we do are the inspection types of activities. And so there's just a general discussion about what would it look like if we considered bringing this in-house. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you. One more question and then I'll move on. Right now, if anyone needs a permit, and that is a permit for special projects, events, movie, filming, and even building, it all comes through your department. Isn't this true right now?
Yes. So we have a special use permit and then a special events permit. Right. Special events permit are issued by the Development Services Division. Special use permits are issued through the Planning Division.
So would it be beneficial to maybe have like a pull that out? Well, the special permits for events, filming, and activity, have you seen it where those permits were not a part of the CDRA process? They go through like maybe events planning or something versus being tied up, because I guess I'm just trying to figure out how can we best streamline the process and get CDRA focused mainly on building permits and permits related to our community regulatory development or affairs process.
Yeah, and I will say, in my previous experience, I am more attuned to seeing special events permits, and I'm not trying to dump anything off my fellow director for Parks and Recreation, but it's typically associated with Parks and Recreation departments because oftentimes the requests are for facility uses related to recreational facilities or senior facilities. I've seen just requests for parks to have these types of special events. And so these types of applications are typically administered through that. Of course, we're community development. We don't shun away from any responsibility. So, we process it now along with our film permits. Those are the two events that are processed through our development services division.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
All right, up next, I have Councilwoman Gums.
Hi, thank you, Mayor, for recognizing me. Mr. Hall, so again, thank you for your presentation. I have two quick questions. One is, and I may have missed it because I did join late, in regards to new equipment as far as cars and vehicles. Has that been planned in your budget? I may have missed it.
Yeah, we didn't discuss it in this budget because the actual funding for the vehicles, and those are, primarily for our inspectors that are going out, that was approved and was authorized in fiscal year 22 budget. And the reason why we don't have them is, as you would imagine, with the supply chain, they're just on back order. So those have been approved in this year's current budget, and they're on order. We're just waiting to receive them.
Okay. And also in regards to, I guess, CDR records, repositories being transferred over from Fulton County, have we made any provisions for that? Because I do know it's sometimes challenging for, I guess, residents to try to get some documents in regards to planning or trying to do some things. And it's also been kind of tough as well for our staff to get things from Fulton County. So is there any provisions that have been made in regards to, I guess, housing our documents and being able to transfer over documents from Fulton County?
Yeah, and this is a collective approach that I can say we're doing across the city. And I'm happy I'm looking at the handsome face of City Clerk Adams there. His team is helping us, throughout the entire city to make sure that we can digitize our current records that we're issuing here at the City of South Fulton, and then more specifically, all of the records, those that we can get our hands on, because as you can imagine, Councilwoman, there's been a bit of a challenge in trying to get all of the records from Fulton County. But as we continue to work with them, we're looking at trying to achieve digitizing all of those, making those available for not only the staff, but for the public as well.
Okay, and is there a cost that possibly is associated that may need to be adjusted in your budget, or is that coming out of the clerk's budget?
We've accounted for that, and I didn't see the I didn't see the city clerk's budget presentation, but I have to assume that we have accounted for that, if not in the clerk's budget, in the city manager's budget.
Okay, all right.
As an overall city project, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions.
All right, and next we have Mayor Pro Tem Reeves.
Thanks for recognizing me, Mayor, but my apologies. He answered my question already. I was bringing him inspectors in the house. I thought I'd really put my hand down. Thank
you. All righty. So I got a few closing comments and questions. And really a lot of it is about the staffing. Could you put that? Oh, that staffing chart is still up. Perfect. But first, in regards to special events permits, film permits, and all those things, which sometimes can include road closures, my, and we've had conversations about this, but my request, and I guess it would really be to you, Madam City Manager, that is that we are using one system with one process and one master calendar to cut down on not only internal confusion but misinformation to the public, as well. There are people that come and they ask now about special events, and they think that they need to go to the parks department, but because it's outside of a park and on the street, they need to come to you. And just coordinating all of these, especially when we have this event coming up for Zion Hill, where we're going to be, shutting down streets or having traffic control to have people go throughout the city. Just making sure that we have one calendar that all the departments can see, to really just help us with building this master calendar that we really need for our cultural affairs calendar for the city. The permit specialists, we are budgeted for 5. How many do we have now? You're muted.
In terms of who we have today, we have 2. And in fact, we're doing interviews for a couple of vacancies tomorrow. So we're looking to fill those within the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for that. That is the number one. One of the I won't say the number one, but it's one of the things that my office is called about most. In terms of staffing, if I could put you on the hot seat, especially for our frontline permit staff, is our pay competitive? Do we need to raise the wages that we are paying those folks? What do you think has been the challenge in attracting and maintaining the number of permit staff that we really need to have?
Let me just say that this question is timely because last week the development services manager and I, along with HR, were looking at the list of individuals that have applied, and we have a rather healthy list of candidates that are interested in coming to work for the city of South Fulton. And so my guess, Mr. Mayor, is that with so many individuals that are interested, that individuals they know and understand, because as a part of the job announcement, we post the salaries. They know what the salaries are. And I think because of the opportunities for the city, I think people are willing to accept the salaries with the understanding that there is always growth available in a city that's growing and moving as we are. So I think it's fairly competitive within the area. I've reached out to some other community development directors to just do an assessment of what they're paying. And we are within $2,000 to $3,000 of their max range as well. And these are some of the more bigger cities in the area.
Awesome. And then lastly, our development site inspectors, these are the people that actually go out to the subdivisions as they are being built. Sure that people are not pouring construction waste down storm drains and all these issues that we actually saw on a development tour that I led about a year ago. Do we have 3 now currently?
Yes.
And you feel like that is enough to cover our entire city and all the development that we have going on?
Well, this is something that we, have to assess kind of at the beginning of the year, in the middle of the fiscal year, and then as we go through the next budget cycle, we can make recommendations. Part of the process of the inspectors are, after the project has been completed, certificate of occupancies are issued, then those activities are closed, and then we move on to some other types of activities. As I've noted before, I suspect that with rising interest rates, we're going to see a little bit of slowdown in terms of our overall development activity. What may pick up, and they're also responsible for, will be commercial activities, because there's a different funding mechanism in place in terms of financing for commercial developments versus that of residential developments. But I suspect that we'll see a little bit of a slowdown on the residential part, specific to the subdivisions, but may pick up a little bit of activity on the commercial side. And we will see, we will kind of assess, once we start the new fiscal year in October, we'll see where we are by the end of the year. And if there is, a desire and a need in consultation with staff and with the city manager's office during the mid-year budget adjustment, we may make a recommendation to add another inspector based upon volume and the number of projects that we have across the city.
Awesome. I will say I am just slightly concerned about that number. That we've gotten some calls in our office where people had concerns about things that were happening on different sites and being able to like rapidly dispatch folks out. I want to make sure that we definitely have someone in the community development office that if people see, they think someone's pouring concrete in the rain, or they think that someone is doing something, that we can have someone to answer the phone and then make sure that we rapidly dispatch someone out to do that, because our residents, I think, are often our first eyes and ears about things like that. But that's it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And Mr. Clerk, you can go ahead and say on the next item.
Next item, next presentation is code enforcement. I believe Mr. Morris is on the call.
Yes, sir, Mr. Clerk. Greetings, Mayor, Council, City Manager. Pleasure to be here today. All right, so let's get into code enforcement. Like I say, pleasure to talk to you all about some of our accomplishments that we've achieved in FY22. So let's start there. Very proud of the team that we've built and put together over the past year. So one of our most proud accomplishments is our community outreach, and that starts with our Code Cares program, where we took on the task of providing services to our senior citizens in the community. We would often hear complaints and concerns that, as we go out to do our daily tasks and our daily citations, that, there weren't enough services and people needed some help. So it's just something that we took upon ourselves to provide that resource for our senior citizens in the community. So we're very proud of the success we've had so far. And there's more to come, as we'll talk about later. Another success point we want to point out is our short-term rental success. We started out this year with about 430 unlicensed short-term rentals within the city. And once we began to re-implement the program and really drill down on compliance, at last check, which was maybe 2 weeks ago, we were down to 130. So we reduced that number of unlicensed and unauthorized short-term rentals from 438 to 135. We dropped about 300. And what we anticipate that with our next mailing, that we'll get that down between those coming into compliance by obtaining a license and those coming to compliance by just removing their listing from the site. We feel we'll come into compliance for a lot less, maybe under 50. And then we can proceed with that next level of enforcement. So with that, we hope to address some of the unauthorized loud parties that take place late at night that we all get calls about, and PD gets the majority of those as well. So we've seen some decrease in those calls as a result to aggressive enforcement, and we're just going to continue that. We got our arms around that issue. We're going to continue to squeeze, so to speak, and eliminate that problem till we have everybody either in compliance or the properties are taken off of the market. So we're going to continue to work on that. Next slide, please. All right, next up, again, equally as proud of our Fight Against Blight program, where since its inception, we have abated 20 plus properties. And this just includes what comes out of city funds. Now, we've had great success with other abatements that we've gone through the process. We've actually identified the owners, and at the last moment, they decide it's cheaper and better and more efficient for them to abate the properties themselves. So the 20 plus properties does not include the voluntary abatement that we receive in quite a few cases. This is just what we've done out of city funds, and we've been great stewards of that city purse. We have, to this point, we had 300,000 allocated this year, of which we've totally spent 200 to this point. But we did have some recent hearings last week, and we're going to do our best to spend every last dollar efficiently, of course, out of that remaining 100,000. So we do have a couple more demolitions and abatements that will be taking place this year to exhaust that 300,000 blighted fund. So we're very proud of that. And like I say, every time that we take down one of these properties, we are in effect reclaiming that neighborhood that's been, plagued by this blighted property for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So it's a great impact on the community when we're able to do this, and we appreciate the funding that makes it all possible. Next slide, please. All right, another example of our community engagement and working across departments, which we try to do at every turn, is we partnered with our economic development department, and we've worked in partnership to do our cutting edge yard of the month, and we rolled out this initiative in 2 different economic districts. One is the Red Oak District, historic Red Oak District. We've done that since June, and then we rolled it out in July in the Old National District. And so what it does is, instead of code enforcement being the bearer of bad news at all times, we wanted to, show appreciation for those that do come into compliance, and those that are not even compliant, but those that just take, great care of their properties. And we want to show that we're encouraging that, and hopefully send a message through positivity as an example to other neighbors. So that's something that we have worked on. It's been a great success. We offer gift cards and the nice yard signs that go out into the front yard. So that's been a great success. We're going to continue that into the holiday season, and we're going to do some fall decorations and Christmas decorations to kind of keep that momentum going and just keep that, that neighborhood and community spirit up within the neighborhoods, a little friendly competition that incentivizes taking care of your properties. And we're very proud of that. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a big one. Our STING program. We talked about this at the beginning of last budget year, and STING is an acronym. It stands for Sign Trouble Is Now Gone. And while it's not completely gone, it's kind of a whack-a-mole game, if you will, but we have seen a significant decrease in signs in our right-of-way. And that's been a direct result of aggressive enforcement, where we don't want any signs to stay out more than 24 hours if we can help it. We call these sign purveyors, and we let them know that, hey, you have one warning and one warning only. And beyond that point, we're going to begin issuing citations for $1,000 per sign for every sign that we've ever picked up of yours. And so in many cases, it scares many of them away, and they don't put signs out in the community. Those that don't, we then implement our STING team, where we will call and pose as customers or consumers, and we will meet them at a location with our partners at PD, of course, and unmarked vehicles, and we will pretend to be customers. And at that point, we issue citations, and we issue 1 citation for every sign that they have put out there. And so that comes up to $1,000 per sign. We actually charge them twice. We charge them $1,000 for the signs and $1,000 for littering. So it's really $2,000 per sign. And we've accumulated about $25,000 in fees and revenues from that. But more beyond the revenue generation is that we've chased some of the bigger sign companies. I won't name any by name. That may not be appropriate, but some of the bigger ones that we've seen no longer, at least for now, operate in the city of South Fulton. So we're very proud of success. We're going to keep it going. Next slide. All right. This is just some community outreach pictures. As we discussed, we partner with PD quite a bit for Coffee with a Cop. town hall meetings, HOA meetings. We want to be, since we took the approach that since we are in many cases, we are public facing to the community, whether we like it or not. So, because we have thousands upon thousands of interaction with the public as much as any other department does. So we want to take that as an opportunity to be a positive impact when we do interact with the public. So let's be proactive in our outreach. It's been our philosophy. Let's be proactive. Let's go to the HOA meetings, coffee with the cop, economic development meetings, and let's get to know the businesses, the people, and form partnerships. We've just recently secured some donations and some partnerships with some of the big companies here in the city and in the state, including Coca-Cola, Home Depot, Publix, who am I missing? McDonald's. So just part of that community outreach is that those companies are going to help us in furthering that goal that we have of, furthering Cold Cares and furthering other community outreach programs. So we're proud of those partnerships and we want to continue to create them. So, Chick-fil-A as well. I forgot Chick-fil-A. So we also partner with them on a limited basis. Next slide, please. All right, here is just a brief snapshot of our revenues that we brought in. Our primary goal, our primary task is not revenue generation. Although we do want to make sure that it's costly, as I mentioned with the Sign Sting program, we want to make sure that it's costly when you do violate. It has to be enough in order to send a message. So our fees can't be so low as to be looked at as just a cost of doing business or a necessary evil. It has to be enough to deter violations and encourage compliance rather. So as you see, our total just from January until August, actually until July, is a total of 212,000, just under 213 that we've accumulated thus far this year. Quite a bit of it comes from our code board efforts and our liens that we place on properties. So we look to be about 300,000 by the end of the year. Next slide, please. All right, and then just to wrap up some bullet points on accomplishments, training is key for keeping staff engaged and and then just well trained and effective in what they do. So we focused on that heavily this year, and we've obtained over 40 certifications staff-wide for staff of 21. And these are state, local, and national certifications such as Level 1B, which comes from the Georgia Soil and Water Conservation Committee, ICC, which is the International Code Council, and GACE, which is the Georgia Association of Code Enforcement. So we want to make sure that our staff is, as well trained as any and as efficient as any, because we want to be the best that we can be. And that's our continuous goal, is continuous improvement. 907 court cases. We do quite a bit when it comes to our court cases. That's a pretty hefty number when it comes to the amount of cases that actually see in a courtroom. So we're very efficient in that process. We have approximately 2,400 C-click fixes that we've handled year to date. Now that's not fiscal year, that's from January until now. So we see about 4,000 per year, and that's quite a bit that we handle them. Our goal is to respond within 24 hours and to close within 4 days. So we practice and we preach efficiency and effectiveness and responsiveness to our residents when it comes to C-click fix. Now we're not perfect by any means, but we do monitor that very, very closely, and we strive to be very responsible when it comes to that. Partnerships. We also partnered with our finance department for FIB Suite, Fulton Industrial Boulevard, where we had quite a few businesses that were not in compliance, some didn't know they were in the city of South Fulton. So we went on a limited sweep of just a general area, and that sweep resulted about 50 businesses in non-compliance. And to this point, we've generated $150,000 and counting, because we still have quite a few of those cases in court. And as they come into compliance, meaning they pay their fees, that total will continue to grow. But just that limited sweep generated 150,000, and we did that in support of and in partnership with the finance department to help generate that income. Another issue is accomplishment, I would say, is when we often want to work with residents, and that's part of Code Care. When we do, we have specific situations that need extra attention, they need extensions. We're often and we're always open to that. One of our mottos is education before citation, and we stick by that. However, there are certain cases that those that choose not to comply, despite being given several chances, several warnings, we've worked with municipal courts in our PD to say, well, if they refuse to show up when code enforcement comes to issue a citation, if they don't come to court or they don't comply after giving many chances, we're now to the point where in those extreme cases, we are issuing arrest warrants when warranted. And again, these are extreme cases where it could have been problem property for 4 or 5 years that has just been sitting, and they've kind of ignored our calls for compliance. And they left us with not much of a choice. So we worked with those different departments, the courts, the judge, and PD to effectuate arrests. And we've seen that be effective. When nothing else has worked, this has worked. So we have that extra tool in our toolbox for those that are difficult problem property owners. And we're going to get compliance, one way or another. And then closing out, we maintain high staff levels throughout this year. We're currently fully staffed at 21. We have been fully staffed for about 4 months now, and knock on wood, we remain that way. Some of that is out of our control, but we hope to at least maintain a high level. At least 90% is where we've been, and we want to maintain that into FY23. And then lastly, we want to talk about web page enhancements. We want to make our information more accessible to residents and to mayor, to council, to anyone that wants to see what we're doing. So we post every 2 weeks all of our violations that we put out. We post our code board dockets to show what cases are going to court and when. And we've enhanced it with pictures to show our demolition and our success stories, because we want to be able to show what we've done successfully, right? The blighted properties that we've taken down and things like that. So we want to be a source where residents can come and get a full view of what we do, the good, bad, and the ugly, and ask any questions, of course, and report complaints. So we've done some enhancement in conjunction, in partnership with the communication department. It's helped us to have access to that. Next slide, please. All right, so goals and objectives, and I will speed through for the sake of time. We want to maintain high employment level, of course. To do the job effectively and efficiently, we have to have staff levels high. And, we've been blessed to be fortunate to be able to do that. We want to maintain that. And number two, we want to implement our clean diversion program, which is, as we generate more cases, we want to speed up that time between citation and court date. And one of the ways we can do that is by implementing a diversion program. And this is something that I worked with, at the time, Solicitor LaDon Jones last year, to develop an education program where for first-time offenders, for people with minor violations, they can go through a diversion program and pay a reduced fine. And what it will cost them is a couple hours of their time to go through that educational portal where they can learn about code enforcement and learn about the importance of keeping the neighborhoods clean and things of that nature. So this will help us process cases faster and get those cases that really need our attention on that docket sooner. So we're close to implementation on that. I want to under promise and over deliver, and we'll say first of the year before we get that up and running, but we should have that up soon. Thirdly, we want to continue our education push and have a well-trained, well-tooled staff. So 30 certifications is our goal. We did 40 this year. We want to bring our sites down just a little bit to 30 for next year. Community outreach expansion is something that we're passionate about. We want to be accessible, and we want to provide education for the community. So we're going to be at any event that we can, volunteering and just being a part of the solution whenever we can be for the city. Fifth is something that we've talked about. We want to, with the demolitions, with the abatements, that's a great first step. And we've been in talks with several, with leadership and with council about our end game. How do we get these properties back to their highest and best use, whatever that may be, is the next step, right? The biggest step was to get rid of the eyesore, and now we need to bring this back to its highest and best use. So we're looking forward to being of assistance and having a partnership with the Land Bank and or Habitat for Humanity. Whatever's needed from us, we're here to assist in that process. Blighted tax implementation is another tool in our tool belt that we're working with finance department to implement. And what it does is for properties that are in a blighted state and remain so for long periods of time, we can implement the blighted tax, which increases their tax liability by a factor of 7. And so we do that in conjunction with Fulton County Tax Assessor's Office. And once we label that property as blighted, that is an incentive, that extra tax burden is an incentive for that property owner to bring that property into compliance and not to hold it in a blighted state. So we want to implement that in FY23. And then our goal for abatements is 25 nuisance property abatements, whether that's demolition or just clean, closed, and secure. Next slide, please. All right, and here are the numbers. We can all kind of see where we're going with that. We had a person going up in personnel with a couple of additions that we are asking for. Purchase contracted services is going up slightly, 300,000. I won't say slightly, but going up 300,000. Supplies also going up. Part of what we're asking for, including those numbers, that we'll be working with PD and Public Works are cameras, illegal dumping cameras. We're trying to look at 2 per district is what we're requesting in order to capture and deter illegal dumping in these districts. And of course, those 2 per won't catch everything, but if we place them in the right locations, we hope it can deter and catch those that are illegally dumping in our city. So that's a part of that budget increase, along with other equipment, tools, and supplies that we need to be more effective. Next slide, please. And here it is, a final breakdown of all of our requests that we're asking for. 4 additional positions, 2 officers and 2 managers. Very excited and hopeful, getting those managerial positions filled, that we will try to fill internally, by the way. It gives, as a command structure, leadership structure, it gives me a lot more tools, a lot more flexibility. As much as I love being out and being in council meetings and HOA meetings and things like that, having some more leadership support is definitely critical for us to be able to strategize and plan long term and implement many of these programs that we want to see succeed. So we're looking forward to that, and we hope to be able to get these things pushed through.
All right, Mr. Morris, thank you so much for your excellent and thorough presentation and your excellent and thorough service to our city. I am going to start again with the queue. I see Dr. Rowell, followed by Councilwoman Willis, and then I will head over to the hands that I see on screen. So, Dr. Rowell.
Thank you for recognizing me. One of the things that we experienced last year was we found out that a lot of the blockage we had on Cascade Road was due to illegal signs being put down into the sewer. How do you, Mr. Morris, and I don't know if that's been a problem in other areas. I know it was a problem on Cascade Road. How do you work with other departments to address that? And then for those property owners who may be harder to locate, I know we're dealing with some companies who are out of state, and they've been somewhat of a challenge. Do you have any suggestions for how we might approach that? And is it anything we can do, or, that we can look at from a budgetary standpoint to support the work for increased enforcement as it relates to that?
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Rao. Excellent questions. With the signs, particularly with that intersection right there at Cascade, that definitely was an issue. And I think that's been, we've noticed that in different areas where, whether it's somebody cleaning up, whether it's the campaign itself, where they are dumping those signs in the catch basin as a quick way to get rid of those signs. So we're hoping with some modifications to the ordinance that will deter some of the pervasive use of political signs, that will help to deter that. And so hopefully that catches much of that. By limiting the amount of signs that we have in our right of way, it will limit the waste and the litter as part of that process. Now, with the harder to locate properties, we have a couple of things that we're doing to address that. One is we just implemented this in July, and I didn't cover it, but we have a quicker abatement process that we work with our legal team, Mr. Hyman's office, to get this through, that we can, instead of going through our lengthy abatement process, which can take 90 to 120 days when we're doing a demolition, in some cases, we just need the grass cut. And we don't need to go through 120 days to get that grass cut, because by then the grass season is, summer's past. So we have a quicker process that we've implemented, and we're using that to kind of get some of those hard to reach companies, particularly those hedge funds. So that's something that we just implement for our faster abatement of these properties. Secondly, what we want to do is, and we're going to implement this in the new year, we want to identify some of these hedge funds, for one particular in District 1 that had a lot of them in a particular area. And we want to start being proactive, and that's where that management team will come into play. For those big hedge funds that own, I'll give a quick example. When I talked to that company, I finally got in touch with them. They said, Mr. Morris, we own 92,000 properties. We forgot about these properties, is basically what they said, because they were so big. So we want to be proactive. We want to find out who these properties are that constantly come before our code board and municipal court. And we want to do something proactive to put them on a list. And that way we can identify where these problem properties are, and perhaps find them more severely to get their attention, that you can't just park 10, 15, 20 houses in our city. And we want to make that kind of painful for you when we do that.
Thank you. I mean, if there's anything we can do relative to that,
yes,
I would be happy to sponsor the legislation for it. As you know, that's been an ongoing problem in my area. And, hopefully we countered it with some of the changes we made to the ordinance. But for those that already had gotten through before we recognized it being a problem, I've been looking around at other cities and to see if they, it doesn't seem like anybody's kind of out there. So we might have to be the first to figure out how we can respond. Top 10 list, I don't know, but it is indeed a problem. Thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Rao. Councilwoman Willis.
Thank you for recognizing me. Thank you for your presentation, all of your strides and efforts in bringing code enforcement violators into compliance. I have a question, and maybe you can't answer it. It may be a question for our city manager. So the blighted anti-blighted ordinance is a legislation that Councilmember Rowell and I sponsored and passed. It was passed by the council in August 2018. And it for all blighted property, for property that has been identified as blighted, we are supposed to be officially, the tax commissioner is supposed to be levying, applying a factor of 7% to the millage rate. on the property. And so I heard you say that you all are going to work towards implementing this, but it should have been in progress since 2018, August of 2018. Granted, I know it may have taken some time to work with the tax commissioner in 2018, but if he is given a list of blighted property, he's supposed to be levying a 7% millage rate to the property. Is that not happening?
No, Councilmember Willis, to my knowledge, it is not happening at this point. And I see somebody put in the chat, right? It's not 7%, it's actually a factor of 7, which is 7 times that millage rate. So to your point, we are, we're
Yeah, I'm actually reading the ordinance. I mean, I have it up as we speak. There is hereby levied on all real property within the city, which has been officially identified and maintained in blighted condition, and increased ad valorem tax, applying a factor of 7 to the millage rate applied to the property. And that's not something that we do. We have the tax commissioner does collect property tax on our behalf. So my question is, why hasn't that been put in? And it's supposed to be done on the first tax bill rendered. So we have identified all of our blighted properties. Why haven't we done this by now? I mean, I know you haven't been here, you weren't here in 2018, but I just don't understand why this is not in place, because this is not something that we're doing, it's something that the tax commissioner is supposed to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so once it was kind of brought to our attention that, that this wasn't done, that it was in place. I've been working with Miss Karen Slayton-Dixon, finance director. And that's the process now, is communicating that with Fulton County and making sure that we get what we have on paper, that we get that implemented. That we have identified the list, we know where the properties are, we know what needs to be done. Now we just need for Fulton County to facilitate that. So that's something that Ms. Slayton-Dixon is heading up, and I'm here to assist and support in any way we can.
So have you, and it might be a question for the city manager, Mr. Has anyone researched on how we get this done? I mean, because this was done in 2018. So the effectuation of this policy should have happened in 2019, 2020, 2021. Here we are now. So 4 years, we are missing out on additional ad valorem that should have been placed on blighted property that is a hindrance to, it costs money for us to bring those properties into compliance if the property owner don't do it. And so that's 4 years of property tax. Are we able to go back retroactively and collect on this property? Is that something that can be done? Is this a legal question? Or, we really need answers to this. And then we need a list of all the properties that are blighted and the revenue that we missed out on and the revenue that we should anticipate getting.
Councilmember Willis, we'll go back and follow up with the tax commission on this and share copies of the legislation, and then work with our legal department if necessary to decide how to rectify this.
Okay, I will forward over this. Do you have the ordinance? Do I need to forward over to you?
You can forward to me if it's available.
Okay, I'll send it to you right now. Thank you. I yield.
All right, in the queue online, I see Councilman Sebastian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Morris, thank you for your presentation. I really look forward to the implementation of these cameras to help us keep some of this littering down across the city, and especially in District 4, where it seems as if I see littering and dumping on a daily basis. Do you know if those cameras, we will be able to move them around, or will they be stationary? That's my first question.
Yes, sir, Councilman Sebastian. So They are with the previous cameras that we've used, which are the same ones that have been used by PD, which are flock cameras. They are movable. So you can, you know, for a fee, you can relocate them to higher priority areas. So that is a possibility.
And do you have any idea how much one of those cameras cost?
I believe they are 2,000, give or take, per camera per year.
Okay. Thank you. Again, thank you for your service and for continuing
that's
to work.
to the best of my recollection, though.
Okay, we can follow up with the chief at a later date. Thank you again for your service and for continuing to work with me to help keep District 4 clean. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, next we have Councilwoman Gomes.
Okay, thank you for recognizing me. Mr. Morris, thank you for your presentation. Mr. Councilman Sebastian pretty much answered some of my questions in regards to the cameras. I know before when we had the cameras put up, there was, I guess, they were solar cameras. And of course, you know, they didn't capture a lot of information. I'm assuming that you all are going to go with a higher tech camera this time to make sure that images are able to be truly shown and for us to really, I guess, capture these violators. Have you all thought about, is it the flock system or anything like that that we can use, even tapping into our police department to kind of help us with this? Because we've been talking about these cameras for probably the longest time, and we really need something done. And you know, that's an additional revenue that we're missing out on, because there are people that violate and we see their tags and we can send them a citation.
Right. Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Gum. So with the camera system that we've had in place have been the flock cameras, and they are solar powered, which makes them, so there are two great things about flock. One is that they are solar powered and you can place them anywhere. You don't need an electrical source. That makes them great. That makes them easy to put in many different locations. The other great thing about flock is that it's closed circuit. So it's a live stream for anything that's going on at that time. The one major downside for code enforcement use is that the angle of the camera only gets about a 15-degree angle, because it's a license plate reader by design. And so it's designed to capture that license plate. So what we noticed that it was a deterrent in some cases, but somebody could be dumping anywhere outside of that 15-degree angle. And you contrast that with the Ring camera that we have on our front door, where it's about 180 degrees, where you can see a natural field of vision. With flock cameras, it only captures such a narrow angle that somebody could be dumping literally 5 feet away from the cameras and we don't catch it. So our challenge, Flock has indicated that they were coming up with a new system that would do all the good stuff that Flock does, along with a wider angle lens. They've been slow, very slow, over 6 to 9 months since we first had that conversation. If memory serves me, it was actually Q4 of last year, 2021, that they were set to come out with that new camera, and they still haven't done it. So many of the new camera systems that we have inspected and tried either require a power source, or they're just deficient in those areas. They're not designed to be standalone cameras. They're designed to be at a convenience store or at a shopping center, but not independent of a source of power. So that's the great thing about Flock, but the weakness is the camera angle. So we're trying to marry those two things. We're trying to marry a better camera system with a better camera angle, along with the convenience and the mobility of a Flock camera.
Okay, so we haven't necessarily identified which camera program we're going to use to, I guess, start with the litter abatement. Is that where we are right now? We haven't identified.
Yes, ma'am. That's correct. That's correct. Okay. We've interviewed several different systems, so we're just identifying the right ones that will meet the needs that for legal dumping.
Okay, Ms. Sadler Jones, if you could, I guess, make this a priority. I know this is something that we've been trying to get for the longest, these cameras in place. So if you could, I guess, work with the department to see if we can get this as a priority, that would also be great as well. Mr. Morris, you've done a great job on the short-term rentals, and thank you for that. Another question that I would like to ask, is the host compliance considered in your budget this year? Do we need to up that? Anything of that nature? What other resources do you need to combat the short-term rental?
Okay, thank you for that question. So host compliance is a part of my budget, and that is, for those that don't know, that is the program, the software that we use to identify different short-term rentals. They scour the internet for about 20 plus different sites, Airbnb, VRBO, and different sites of that nature. So they're working to our side. They're not perfect, as any other software company is going to have its flaws and kinks, but they are doing the trick for us right now. So I think we're well positioned to be able to continue to draw that number down from 130, and hopefully we cut that in half by the end of the year. So we're in good shape with that.
Also, did you, and this is my last question because I think we were only limited to 3 questions. I could have missed this, but did you say that you have additional staff to actually work maybe on the weekends to address those parties, Airbnbs, those type of things, for those code violations?
Well, we didn't specifically talk about the weekends, but we do have a standard Saturday or Sunday. We do have an officer that does work each and every weekend, and then from as needed, we'll have additional officers to work that extra day. Or let's say if there's a vending issue in the commercial zones, and we know we need to hit it with a heavy sweep, then we'll have a few officers to work that particular weekend.
Okay, because I know at one point in time, the chief and yourself were talking about bringing on, I guess, a person to kind of work with them to address code issues over the weekends for parties, or those type of things. So I was just trying to figure out if that was implemented, or do you all still plan to do that?
Right. And so what we've done is we kind of work in partnership with PD. So many of those issues that happen at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock at night are noise complaints, or they're party violations that typically fall under PD as well, or primarily. And so what we do is we'll get those reports. If those are reported to us, then we'll follow up and see what code violations are there. But as that police officer responds, and they will typically let me know, hey, we had an Airbnb party at this location, and then we can see what other violations that we can tag on along with whatever PD is already written.
Okay, got it. And one other thing, did we increase the blight budget, the blight budget? Did we increase it? I think it was 250 in the legislation. Have we gone up to 300,000? Because I heard the number of 300,000 mentioned.
Yes, ma'am. It was 300,000 for FY22, and it remained 300,000 for FY23. But we do have an additional 125,000 in CDBG funds. So, of course, those can only be used in certain census tracts, but that does stretch our dollars a lot further. So we do have that additional resource from CDBG.
And if you do not use the money, so like in District 2, a lot of the demolished homes were voluntary. If you don't use the money, where exactly does all of that go? Does it roll over to the next, or what happens with that money?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I try to spend it all efficiently and effectively, but I try to spend all of it because I haven't asked that question, and I should know, but I don't know. So I try to we try to account for every single penny. But that's a question that maybe somebody can weigh in and help me out.
Okay, we'll talk offline about that. Thank you.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Reeves.
Thank you, Mayor, for recognizing me. Thank you, Mr. Morris, for your great presentation. I do want to know where are we at? I don't know if this falls really under short-term rental, but the rooming houses like companies use as well as an online platform. Where are we at with the enforcement of those?
Yes, sir. That's a great question. And greetings, Councilman, Mayor Pro Tem Reed. So there's two different categories. Rooming houses are 100% illegal in residential areas in the city of South Fulton, 100%. That's rooming houses and boarding houses. However, there's a company that I think I've spoken with some on this panel about, a company that has invested quite a bit, and they have found a legal loophole where their lawyers have sent us basically a cease and desist regarding enforcement. And we've been advised to do just that for the time being. And what they found is a legal loophole, not just with us, but with the city of Atlanta, Clayton County, DeKalb County, statewide, where they found a loophole into that rooming house definition. And they found a way to make it look, sound, and act like a rooming house without legally being a rooming house. And so that's our challenge, is this company that is well funded, and they are buying houses and they are doing everything a rooming house does, but legally it's not considered a rooming house. So I know Attorney Hyman in his office is working, they're monitoring some cases in Clayton County and other jurisdictions to see where the legal precedent comes out. And so they're monitoring that closely, but as of right now, we're limited. So what we've been doing, because we can't attack that issue on a rooming house ordinance, we've been making a file of this particular company of all of the disturbances, all of the disorderly conducts, the fights, the trash issues. And what we want to make it known, if we ever have to go to a state level, we want to have a case file to show that while they present themselves as the Uber or the Robin Hood of affordable housing, we want to show that they are doing a disservice to the community by having these residents in unsafe homes where you have 12 people to a house or 10 people to a house in unsafe and unsanitary conditions. So we're just building our case file, so when we're called upon to testify on our belief, then we can show that these properties are not what they say they are.
Absolutely. And because you mentioned something about 12 people to a house, and we have a parking ordinance, is there a way to kind of crack down by the number of cars that they have at a property?
Absolutely. And I failed to mention that. So that's the other thing that we do, is that when we know we've identified this to be one of those properties that this company owns or controls, then we hit them for everything else, because with those 12 people come a lot more trash, obviously, a lot more cars in many cases. So we still want to hit that, and we check to see if they've gotten a permit to do that conversion. So we're going to hit you for every single thing that we can, short of the rooming house ordinance. But that's what we do. We go through with a fine-tooth comb, and what we try to do is, if we can find our way into the house, if we just kind of knock on the door and ask, can we come in, then we'll gather more information there too. But absolutely, Mayor Pro Tem, we hit them for everything that we can, and we just note what we can.
Absolutely. And then the last thing out there when it comes to the blighted house is the in the process in which it goes that y'all have a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 designation. Is it possible to have the inspectors who actually present to the judge the recommendation for tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 to do that before y'all start y'all process, and creating a master list for the city? We know which houses are going to be demolished and which houses are going to be clean and closed as it currently stands.
We sure can. And that's something that I think you and I want to counsel on a town hall meeting. You mentioned that. We've since implemented something similar to that. We're not quite there yet, but what we are having our building official who makes the determination on whether this property gets demolished or just clean and closed. He's working with us to work his way through that list so that we know before we go to court, and we can make that more public for definitely for mayor and council, so you all can know which properties in your district are in which tier 1 being the worst, demolition, tier 2, and then they improve from there. So we are working on that, and we will have something ready this year.
Thank you again, Mr. Morris. Appreciate your service.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Morris. I did have a couple of questions. The money that is left, I'm sorry, when blighted properties have been demolished, how are we maintaining the cutting of grass and the maintaining of the lot after that demolition has happened? I'm thinking specifically of a house on Peppermill, but I know that it's been happening maybe at a couple of other houses. Is there money in a budget somewhere for that?
Yes, sir, Mayor Khalid. That is something that to this point we have not had in our budget to do. But what we're planning to do with this, as a matter of protocol, is to, as we have some leftover funds in this year's budget, those will be properties that we can at least clean the right of way. We may not have it in our budget to clean the entire property, but at least clean the right of way the first 20 feet or so. And we'll put those on a list. Our plan is to put those 10, 12 properties, and hopefully we're not taking care of these for a decade. Hopefully we have we'll have a long-term solution in place where we're not constantly having to put this resource in, because the more resources we put into that, the less resources we have for more demolitions. But we don't want to create another eyesore there as well. So we do want to do some maintenance there on a regular scheduled program, maybe once a quarter. I think that's all that our budget will allow at this point. If we can see where we can allocate more, then we certainly will consider it. And if we're directed to, then obviously we will as well.
Awesome. I don't know if you all have the equipment yourself, or if it might be more cost effective, but I would encourage that we maybe look into partnering with our local contractors. Every district has guys that are out cutting grass, right, in the neighborhoods, and for like maybe $45, $50, they could cut some of these yards, and it would be a great way to hire locally, hire and support our local businesses. There are also, as you may be aware, farmers that have sheep and goats, which actually have lower methane emissions than some cities are using now to maintain blighted properties. And then lastly, I would argue that whatever we spend on those properties, and perhaps we just need to connect with legal, but that whatever we spend maintaining those properties could be added to the bill. If we're not able to get this 7 times of tax money that we should be getting from the tax commissioner, we should at least be able to include the maintenance of those properties on the bill when they do sell. But I know that those are some things that we're looking at long term.
Yes, sir. And Mayor, that's something that we definitely do. We account for every single penny that we, whether it's demolition, maintenance, up to including legal costs and reasonable staff time. We account for every single penny that we have to expend in abating a property. So we make sure that's attached to that lien. So before they can sell or refinance, they have to come back and pay the city before they can dispose of that property in any way.
Awesome.
And with interest, and it's with interest on a per diem basis.
Perfect. I see Dr. Rao has her hand raised and she's talking about this in the chat. So hopefully, Dr. Rao, this is maybe some legislation that we can work on together to take care of and use the same sort of blighted property language that we have to maintain blighted properties, to even expand it to just lots where people are not, maintaining their grass.
Thank you, Mayor. I would hope that we would not even have to go that route. I would hope that we could address it during this budget cycle, to at least begin by putting some seed money in to address these lots. And I think Mr. Morris really covered it, that we would be covered in terms of being able to recoup those funds if their property is ever sold. So I know, we've talked about kind of taking our blighted program to the next level in terms of a full circle, because we don't take these properties, but we have a number of properties who have just been really, for lack of a better word, abandoned for decades, that there may be an opportunity to bring those again to better and higher use, creating affordable housing, workforce housing for our employees or whatever. I hope we begin to think more comprehensively in that way. And I would definitely love to see our fiscal year 23 year budget allocate some money to deal with these overgrown yards and lots that, we can't locate people because they're vacant or whatever. It would do us, it'll be a huge service to our residents in the city to see us address some of these properties that have been abandoned for too long.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Rowell. And when I wrote this blighted property fund, when we created it back in like 2018, that was always my hope. So I definitely want to circle back to that. Councilwoman Williams.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Morris, you and I have become fast friends very quickly around this issue. How long would it take you, and Councilwoman Rowell touched on what I was going to say. So how long would it take you to rework your budget and include money to handle the maintenance of the vacant lots that we have in the city right now, and get back to us with the revised budget with a number for that?
Thank you, Councilwoman Williams. And yes, we have become very, very closely acquainted about these issues. I would defer to the city manager's office on that. I will say that I think with our community development block grant funds, along with the $300,000 the blighted property fund, that we do have some that can go toward that. It's just a matter of allocation. So, but as far as any additional funds, I would just defer that to Ms. Sadler Jones.
Okay, Ms. Sadler Jones, how long would it take to add additional funds to the code enforcement budget, add some projections, and come back to us with a revised budget for code enforcement so that we can take care of this?
I mean, I would think maybe by next week, we would need to meet with Brian and his team. And then I'd also want to work with our legal team in regards to any type of private property issues that we would need to be able to address.
So would the close of business by the 26th give you sufficient time?
Yes, that's sufficient time.
All right. If you could please make that happen, I look forward to receiving a revised budget that includes projections for funding for maintenance of vacant lots by next Friday, close of business.
All right. Councilwoman Willis.
So, Mr. Morris, isn't it true that you said we have demolished about 22 properties at this point? Or is it more than that?
Yes, the city has demolished or abated in some form about 22 properties. I can get that.
So in order to gain access to abate those properties, we were given legal access to those properties to bring them into compliance or provide some type of remediation to those properties, correct?
That's correct.
So we don't have to go back through that process if we have to go back and maintain those properties because we've already been given access to them, correct? Or is that a legal question?
That may be a legal question, but I tend to agree with that.
Okay. The other thing is, isn't it true that when we get access to these properties to abate these properties, we go through a lengthy legal process, but the first step is we have a lien on these properties. Isn't that correct?
The first step, in
Don't we
some,
have to have some type of legal lien in order to, isn't that to be, okay, so it goes through the code enforcement process. And then if they are fined and they don't pay the fine, we have a lien placed on the property, correct?
yes.
So if there is a lien already on a property and we are maintaining a property, we have abated the property, I guess this would be a legal question. Wouldn't all we have to do is just record the cost to the lien, Mr. Hyman, Attorney Hyman? Because that's the whole purpose of a lien. Like if anybody were to sell that property or try to do anything, any real estate transaction, they cannot do anything to the real estate transaction until the lien is satisfied.
If I heard you correctly, Councilor Willis, you mentioned two concepts. One was abate and then one was lien. And normally what happens is that the person will be cited. They'll come before code enforcement board. The code enforcement board will try and get them to correct the situation. If they don't, after a requisite amount of time, then I'll also be requested to place a lien on the property. Now, distinguishing that from abatement, if you have some structure that is dilapidated, causing a health and safety concern, then that's where I think it was previously mentioned the tier gets associated or placed on the property, tier 1, tier 2, 3, and then ultimately a hearing is held before the judge. Say, look, we need to abate this property, i.e., make the owner do it within 10 days. If they don't do it, then we'll do it. And oftentimes that results in it being demolished, and then those costs are likewise recorded against the property.
Right. So so we don't have to go down the route of creating legislation to recoup costs for abating or maintaining the property, because our legal process already does it by recording the lien. Am I correct?
Yeah, what happens is that when we record the lien and then normally somebody wants to buy it, that's when we build in all our costs.
Right. So that's all I'm trying to point. I just don't want us to go down a route creating unnecessary legislation, because our legal process already has that built in. Before we can even touch the property, it has to have a lien. And before it even gets to the point of abating, we have already placed a lien on the property. So I just don't want us creating unnecessary legislation when our legal process already takes care of it. And so what I'm hearing and gathering from you is that there is a lien on the property before we even get to the point of abating. And even when we abate, there's a lien on a property to record all of the costs that has gone into remediate that property. So we don't need legislation to recoup our funds for remediating property. It's already being done through the legal process. Am I understanding that correct, Ms. Attorney Hyman?
What happens, we'll wind up getting our money really on the back end. The light pendants, for example, you put a light pendant and say there's pending action against this property, and that goes out really before you get to the abatement hearing. And then once you get the abatement hearing, then the judge will put in the order. That's what allows or authorizes us to correct the problem if the owner does it. Then it gets demolished. And so all the costs leading up to demolition, we wind up recouping on the back end once somebody wants to buy the property. But between the liens being filed of record and between the lights pendants and between the cost of code enforcement and those costs are being tracked such that if there's a potential buyer, that's when and they say, what's the payoff on this property? We'll say, okay, the cost of the liens plus interest, plus the demolition costs, plus administrative costs, and then here's the grand total.
Okay, thank you so much. You answered the question. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right.
All right. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, I believe this was our last presentation. Go ahead, Mr. Adams.
Yes, this was the last presentation for today.
All right, then we've got a bit of a reprieve before our 3 o'clock. Thank you, everyone.
Actually, it's 3:30.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Actually, the URA meeting's at 3:30, Mr. Mayor.
3:30, perfect.
In person, correct?
In person at City Hall.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I will see you all at 3:30. Thank you.
Recording stopped.